Doctor Who's 60th anniversary year is already potentially getting quite interesting, because the Mirror are reporting that missing episode animations are back. And not only this, but that certain episodes of 60s Doctor Who from the William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton eras are set to be colourised. Lost Doctor Who episodes are being brought back to life using cartoons and colour, the article reads. To mark the sci-fi show's 60th anniversary this year, 2 stories from the 60s are to be drawn and released on Blu-ray and DVD. They are William Hartnell's penultimate story, The Smugglers, and Patrick Troughton's third adventure, The Underwater Menace. Both 4-part stories were originally transmitted by the BBC before film prints were sold overseas and the original tapes were destroyed. Episodes 2 and 3 of The Underwater Menace have been recovered, but only brief clips from The Smugglers exist. An insider said, "Fans have been delighted as the show's 4th season has been slowly restored through animated episodes. Only 10 of the 43 broadcast episodes still exist, so we're getting to see the missing classics." Last year, the BBC ended the release of animated versions after BBC America stopped funding the restoration of early stories, but new funding has been arranged. BBC bosses plan to colourize certain stories from the Hartnell and Troughton eras for broadcast next year. This is likely to include the very first story, An Unearthly Child. The animation deal is not connected to the show's tie-up with Disney+. So a very interesting article. At present it is just still a rumour, nothing has been officially confirmed. But yeah, very interesting to speculate about how this might shape up and what it might mean, for the missing episodes more broadly. Obviously, there are 2 strands to what's going on here, potentially. So first of all, we have the return of the missing episode animations, which, like the article said, have been running, for a few years and stopped last year with The Abominable Snowmen being the final release date. And it's basically come out since then that, like the article says, the reason for that particular batch of animations being stopped was that BBC America pulled the funding. And obviously now that we know about the Disney Plus deal and things sort of being rearranged and renegotiated behind the scenes, it is fairly obvious why BBC America would no longer have any interest in or any sort of stake in Doctor Who, and more broadly, but also as well with animations with the missing episodes. And then we have this second strand, this second can of worms, which concerns the 60s episodes which do exist, being given a new lease of life by being colourised. Which, is a controversial topic. It's one that has come up before, of course. I mean, there are many fans, people like Babel Colour on YouTube that have colourised, footage from Doctor Who or entire episodes or whatever in the past, or I believe are working on stuff, like that, personal projects. So it's not a new idea, but it's something which, if it was to be done officially, would, be quite controversial, I suppose, to put it mildly. And there's kind of lots to say there in terms of how that might work, because obviously the episodes themselves, were made and broadcast in black and white, and that's how they've existed all these years. But a potentially interesting idea there. So let's cover both of these strands, starting off with the missing episodes. So according to the reports, a new source of funding has been found for these missing episode animations. And it's not clear exactly what that is, but the report kind of goes to great lengths to say, it's not the Disney Plus thing, it's something different to that. So who knows exactly, what's happened here behind the scenes, assuming, of course, that it is true. But if the rumour is true, that means 2 new animations are in the pipeline, in the form of The Smugglers and The Underwater Menace. 2 stories with a beach/underwater theme, perhaps coincidentally, perhaps not. So The Smugglers is a completely missing serial. All 4 parts of that story, are no longer in the archives. And then with The Underwater Menace, we do have the middle 2 parts of that story, so episodes 2 and 3, but not episodes 1 and 4. So aside from the sort of underwater theme that I've just suggested there, which may or may not be, an actual thing, there's nothing particularly notable about these 2 stories compared to other missing episodes. Aside from the fact, I suppose, as well, that if these 2 were to be animated, that would just leave one more story from season 4 to be animated in the form of The Highlanders, because all the other missing stories, or partly missing stories, from that season have now been animated. The Smugglers is an interesting one. It's a first Doctor story with pirates, no kind of monsters or aliens as such. And not a story that people kind of seem to be familiar with from what I've seen, online and stuff in the discussion about this. And I share that sentiment myself. To be honest, it's not one that I particularly know lots about. Then the Underwater Menace is a slightly different beast because obviously, we do have half that story, existing in the archives. Like I say, episode 2 was discovered back in 2011 and there was a subsequent DVD release of the story which eventually came out in 2015. With the first and last instalments represented by Telesnap reconstructions, and I know there was a bit of kind of contention surrounding those and the quality of those Telesnap reconstructions. I believe they were quite basic compared to some of the other reconstructions, we've had in terms of Telesnap stuff. So again, not an overly familiar story for the majority of fans, I would say. And it's interesting as well because, originally when I read this article, this rumour, I kind of thought, oh, it kind of means they're going to just animate the first and last instalments. But I guess ultimately, if this does come to pass, it's more likely that they'll animate the whole thing as a whole package. I like them with recent stories, like with the Faceless Ones or the Abominable Snowmen, where there are instalments of those stories that do exist in the archives, but they've still made animations of those surviving instalments so you can watch the whole thing as like a whole package. I think ultimately, a lot of people would just be happy to see more animations, really, regardless of the story choices. I mean, neither of these stories are at the top of anyone's list, I would say, in terms of stories to be animated. But, if this rumour is true, if it does come to pass, and it brings us, one step closer to having a complete version of Season 4 to watch, I don't think anybody's going to be complaining. But the idea that existing black and white episodes might be colourised is something which I think a lot more people might struggle to get behind. Now again, this is just a rumour, it's kind of actually like a footnote in the article, it's not a full article in itself, it's just there as like a line at the bottom, without any particular indication, as to what it would mean, any detail or anything, even any detail of the stories that would be covered, although it kind of suggests that we might be getting an Unearthly Child. But yeah, like I say, it's something which fans have been doing behind the scenes for years. We've had like colourised clips. I mean, you can find them on YouTube, colourised clips of old black and white, 60s stories. I think if they were to do this in an official capacity, it would kind of be quite surprising, actually, in a sense. Although it would be fitting, with the 60th year and everything, to have, particularly the very first Doctor Who story available to watch, in colour, so to speak. I mean, ultimately, it would just be an alternative presentation of the story or stories in question. It wouldn't be kind of usurping the originals or anything. The originals would still stand as the originals. These would just be kind of alternative ways to view those stories, if you like. I mean, it's a much more subjective issue on so many levels. I mean, least of all things like, colour references and stuff. How would you determine what colour things were or were meant to be? It would require so much research. And I think even then, the end product, people would look at it and say, that's the wrong colour, or that doesn't match up, or that's not how I imagined it to be. It's such a subjective thing, these black and white episodes. We kind of watch them and perhaps kind of subconsciously imagine things to be a certain colour or whatever, and then in actual fact, maybe they were, maybe they weren't. And maybe if an episode was to be colourised, maybe it would look how we expect it to look, maybe it wouldn't. So it is a can of worms, I think it's something which I kind of would be up for seeing, I'd give it a go. I'm certainly not against the idea. But at the same time, I kind of recognise that there will be purists out there that think this is a bad idea or whatever, or shouldn't be done. Personally speaking, I think, like I say, to have it as an alternative presentation for select, sort of iconic, notable stories would be a nice thing to see, but perhaps not something which everybody would kind of be able to get behind and enjoy. So that's the rumour. Another thing that's worth saying about all of this, well, apart from the fact that it might not be true, is the fact that if this new funding has only just been found and arranged and things are still being negotiated, perhaps, and work is only just beginning, then, we're not likely to see any kind of end products for any of this until kind of next year at the earliest, really. And obviously with something like colourising, depending what approach they take, and I'm no kind of technical expert on that, but obviously, as far as I understand, it would be a lengthy process to get that right. So yeah, both of these things, the animations and the colourisations potentially as well, wouldn't be things that would just be happening overnight. And as such, it's unlikely that we're going to be getting any of this actually within the 60th anniversary year. But if these rumours are true, then it will at least be nice to know in this year, of the anniversary, that these projects are in development, to get a bit of information about them, confirmation, maybe some preview clips later in the year perhaps, and ultimately to just know that the future of the missing episode animations is in safe hands, and that there is a future, and the funding has been found, all that stuff, would be really, really nice to know, even if we don't see the end results of these projects until, next year or beyond. Those are my thoughts on these rumours concerning 60s episodes of Doctor Who, but what do you think about all this in terms of the missing episode animations and also this idea of colorising surviving episodes? Would you be excited to see animated versions of The Smugglers and The Underwater Menace? And would you be able to get behind this idea of colorising black and white episodes, or is it something you'd be a bit more iffy on? Whatever the case, be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Please give this video a like if you have enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you're new for more stuff like this in the future. And if you'd like to go the extra mile in supporting the content I make, you can find the link to my Patreon page in the video description. But otherwise, until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.